Welcome to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Coming up, we'll review the week's top stories about political days at the Illinois State Fair, where Democrats and Republicans traded barbs. I'll then join the Center Square's Dan McCaleb to further discuss those stories and more. That's ahead with Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop.
They're simple, boring, never thought of until they're needed. They're windshield wipers. Only when Mary Anderson became annoyed that New York trolley drivers were stopping to wipe their windshield by hand did anybody do something about it. By attaching a spring-loaded arm to a rubber blade, one woman made travel easier and safer. Look to innovate and pass it on. From passiton.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Here are some of the top stories from the past week. Illinois Democrats rallying at the Illinois State Fair in Springfield pushed for more power at the statehouse while making the case for a Kamala Harris presidency. Illinois House Speaker Chris Welch declared his chamber already has the Great 78. That's the number of Democrats versus 40 Republicans.
But you know what? In 24, we want more. You want to help us elect more in 24? If you do that, we're going to make more history.
Welch also said history could be made by electing Harris as the first woman president. Governor J.B. Pritzker downplayed Republican criticism that Harris has to answer for covering up President Joe Biden's viability.
That's ludicrous. Sir, first of all, Joe Biden has been one of the greatest presidents we've had. Look at all the things he got done in a bipartisan fashion.
The Democratic National Convention begins next week, where the party is expected to officially nominate Harris after Biden dropped out of the race. And after Democrats took to the Illinois State Fair this week, Republicans had their turn to respond. Wednesday, Speaker Welch said they aim to get more Democrats. Thursday, House Minority Leader Tony McCombie said more Democrats will hurt taxpayers by allowing them to pass bigger budgets onto taxpayers.
So I don't know what if he wants 5 more progressive that can, be tax and spend Democrats, and I know that's what Illinoisans do not want. And that's certainly in the suburbs. They don't want that. They're already having high cost issues right now, inflation, high property tax, high groceries, high gas. They don't want that either.
Another line Democrats used in their messaging earlier in the week was to call Republicans, quote, weird. McCombie responded with a phrase for Democrats.
They're just out of touch. They're out of touch.
After last month's Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, where former President Donald Trump received the official party nomination, Democrats will gather in Chicago for their national convention next week to officially nominate Kamala Harris. After being called a, quote, real loser by former President Donald Trump, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker said it's Trump who's the loser. Elon Musk, the owner of X, hosted a more than 2-hour discussion with Trump Monday where Trump discussed being shot in the ear, the economy, foreign policy, and government efficiency. The Republican wants to get rid of the U.S. Department of Education and said some states will do well, but not others.
I got so many friends that are in those states, even if they're Democrats. I hate to mention certain states, but Illinois is badly run with Pritzker. He's a real loser.
Asked for a response at the state fair on Wednesday, Pritzker said it's Trump who's the loser.
Well, let's see. Donald Trump was a loser in 2020. He was a loser in 2022 when he tried to endorse a whole bunch of people for office. He's going to lose again in 2024.
Those are the top stories from the past week from Illinois. Find more online at thecentersquare.com. Coming up for Illinois in Focus, I'll join the Center Square's Dan McCaleb to further discuss the news. This is Illinois in Focus, a production of America's Talking Network. I'm Greg Bishop.
Do you know what elected officials in Illinois are doing with your tax dollars? Do you want to make sure that your voice is heard? If so, then you need Blue Room Stream, a live and archived video streaming service that provides access to government meetings and events. With Blue Room Stream, you can watch how your elected officials make decisions, hold them accountable for their actions, and be a more informed citizen. Blue Room Stream is the perfect way to get involved in the democratic process and to make a difference in your community. Subscribe today at blueroomstream.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, Chief Content Officer at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. We are recording this on Thursday, August 15th. The Democratic National Convention kicks off in Chicago on Monday, where delegates are expected to formalize the nomination of Vice President Kamala Harris as their presidential candidate. The Center Square will have 3 journalists on the ground in Chicago to cover the convention, including Illinois in Focus co-host Greg Bishop. Ahead of the convention, Greg and other staffers have been covering the Illinois State Fair in Springfield, where Democrats held their day Wednesday and Republicans on Thursday. Greg Bishop joins me now to discuss all things politics, both from the State Fair and at next week's convention. Greg, let's start with the State's Fair. Republicans had their day today. What are they focused on?
So Republicans reacting to Democrats who are making the announcement that they're looking for more power in the state of Illinois. So it's traditional every year at the Illinois State Fair. There's Governor's Day, and then the opposing party has a day following that. Since Democrats have the governor's office, Governor's Day is essentially Democrats' Day. So they held a breakfast early in the morning for their County Chairs Association, and they had Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton talk about how Republicans are weird. You had Governor J.B. Pritzker highlight a bunch of Democrat policy initiatives from abortion to the budget and beyond that he says Republicans voted against. And he says that Republicans, it's no wonder they're the super minority party in the state of Illinois. Then you had even others like Senate President Don Harmon say, while it's an exciting election year, he says that it's going to be challenging. And he equated it to the re-election of Barack Obama in 2012 when they were electing an incumbent. And Harmon, the Senate president for Illinois, he said that essentially they've got the same kind of dynamic, which is interesting. Because one thing that Republicans are going to harp on, at least when it comes to the national political scene, is the inflation and the open border and a host of other things that they say the Biden-Harris administration got wrong. So to hear that dynamic from the Democrats was rather fascinating. So yesterday, the Democrats had their brunch, then they went to the fairgrounds and they held a rally where Democrats heard even more of the same type of messaging. But Republicans had their day today. While there was a little bit of overcast and their rally at the state fair was delayed because of rain, they still took to the stage after it cleared up, and the party faithful, they stuck around and enjoyed lunch and heard from a series of speakers from new Republican Party chairman, Kathy Salvi, the House Minority Leader, Tony McCombie, and the Senate Minority Leader, John Curran. They also had a special guest here today, the former acting Attorney General under the Trump administration, Matt Whitaker, who shared some messages as well. But one thing that Republicans seem to make clear is that Democrats are, as they say, delivering nothing but hurt to Illinois taxpayers. And in particular, Kathy Salvi, she highlighted a whole host of things from the crime wave that's hitting a lot of neighborhoods, including Chicago, essentially saying that it's the Democrat policies that are fueling that, the high taxes across the states with the second highest property taxes. But you also have the ongoing out-migration problems that Republicans were quick to point out. Something, by the way, Dan, that we've reported time and again at thecentersquare.com. Democrats deny that there is continued population decline. And they say that the U.S. Census is getting the numbers wrong, but it's not just the census that's highlighting Illinois' continued population decline. You look at IRS data, migration data, and you can clearly see that Illinois continues to see fewer people year after year, with those people moving their tax dollars to other states to the tune of $10 billion, if not more, especially when it's compounded year after year. So interesting to hear the dynamic between these two parties. But also you've got Tony McCombie, the House Minority Leader. I chatted with her briefly before she took the stage and got her to react to several things. One, House Speaker Chris Welch on Wednesday said that they have the great 78. That is 78 Democrats in the Illinois House compared to 40 Republicans in the Illinois House. So the Democrats have a supermajority, but Welch said that they want more. So he wants more power to be held by Democrats at this upcoming election, with statehouse seats across the state up for re-election or some kind of contested election. But McCombie said that that's bad for taxpayers. And essentially what that means is now they can pass budgets much easier. And she highlighted the most recent budget that passed. Dan, we were there at 2, 3 in the morning watching this unfold as they voted 3 different times to try to get the budget passed because they did not have enough Democrats to pass the budget. So they had to do some maneuvering to get people in line and to have that early morning vote to actually pass the budget. McCombie says if Democrats get more seats in the House, that just makes that much more easier for them to pass bloated budgets without having to get all Democrats on board. So a bit of a warning message from McCombie on the idea and the prospect of even more Democrats being elected to the Illinois State House.
Greg, let me go back to the out-migration Illinois population situation where, of course, Governor Pritzker has repeatedly denied that Illinois is losing population. Did that topic at all come up during Governor's Day, Democrats' Day yesterday?
Absolutely not. Nobody addressed that during their speeches. Nobody even hinted at Illinois' economic issues during Democrat Day. They just highlighted a lot of the policies that they espouse, especially abortion policies. And they also harped against the former Republican president, calling him a convicted felon, and a whole host of other pejoratives. So it really seemed that they're focused, at least the Democrats, on increasing awareness about abortion policies and going after the character of Donald Trump, while Republicans are, in Illinois at least, they're highlighting that Democratic rule of a state like Illinois has not made things better. They're pointing to the economic conditions. We just saw the state's unemployment rate went up. State agency recently just announced that. So clearly, there's a split screen here. I know that in the political world, when it comes to commentating on these things, you always hear about this split screen. And we clearly see that with Democrats in the supermajority continuing on with their policies they say are helping people, but Republicans saying that it's not helping people, and they point to economic conditions, high taxes, inflation, and even the ongoing border situation. And something else that is clearly a sticking point for Republicans, they highlight the $1 billion+ that Illinois taxpayers are paying for non-citizen health care and a whole host of other amenities that are being funded by the taxpayers for non-citizens in this state. So again, we'll hear a lot more about all of this with about 80 days left before the November 5th election, Dan. And believe it or not, early voting, that begins September 26th.
So that's just barely a month away. Greg, well, that's a good segue into our next topic. Chicago is hosting a Democratic National Convention beginning Monday. You will be on the ground in Chicago at the United Center where the keynote speakers will be at. I would expect Governor Pritzker to be a speaker at the event. What do you know?
Yeah, apparently he is. And he was asked Wednesday at the fair to preview some of what he may say. He wasn't willing to give a complete preview, but I think that he's gearing towards highlighting Illinois, welcoming the delegates to Illinois, it being in Chicago, and he'll likely talk about all of the things that he says are policies that Democrats got done in Illinois that should be done in other states. Everything, again, from the abortion issue to the child tax credit issue. He may talk about the balanced budgets he passed. And one of the go-to stump lines that the governor has had recently is he talks about how the budget was poorly managed under Republicans. But it's hard to look at that, especially when you see that Republicans have never had control of, at least in the 10 years I've been watching the State House closely, they've never had control of the legislature, which is where the budgets originate. Yeah, they had a 4-year stint with a Republican governor, Bruce Rauner, but even then, the budget impasse that happened, more than 2 years worth, that was really driven because of the legislature passing wholly unbalanced budgets. I remember one year, Mike Madigan at that time passed a budget that was like $6 billion out of balance, and Rauner did not want to sign that. So clearly, there's going to be some interesting messaging from Governor Pritzker in Chicago welcoming delegates to the convention. But he will be just one of many speakers throughout the 4-day convention. We're also hearing word that Barack Obama may speak, and I imagine a lot of celebrities may be there to speak as well. But if one thing's for sure, you can see a pretty big production. Democrats are bringing in a lot of money. And if it's anything that shows what was at the Democrats' breakfast on Wednesday, high flashy videos and highly produced cinematic videos. I imagine that's going to be all over the place at the Democratic National Convention for their 4 days starting on Monday.
Before we go jump deeper into the Democratic National Convention next week, where you'll be at, Greg, Governor Pritzker and former President Donald Trump, who of course is the Republican nominee for president on this November's ballot, they got in a bit of a war of words. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the term loser has been thrown around by both. So Monday largely listened to a conversation between former President Trump and Elon Musk on X, formerly Twitter. This is the social media network that Musk purchased not long ago, wanting to make sure that there was a truly free speech social media out there. And he hosted Donald Trump for a more than 2-hour-long conversation. Dan, they talked about everything from the attempted assassination to foreign policy, domestic policy, and even economic policy. But when they started talking about government efficiency, something that Musk offered himself up to the former president to possibly work on a commission to look at more government efficiency if Trump was to be elected, Trump had mentioned that he is wanting to parse down the U.S. Department of Education, if not eliminate it. And that led to the former president talking about how some states are going to do great. They're going to be able to manage their education without any problems. They're going to be able to get proficiency rates up. But then he said there are other states that aren't going to do so great. And then he mentioned Governor J.B. Pritzker in the state of Illinois, and he said, quote, he's a real loser. He also went on further to say that he's incompetent and that his family didn't want him running the business, so he ended up becoming governor of Illinois. So some pretty harsh words from Trump. Not the first time Trump's gone after Pritzker, but Pritzker was asked about it on Wednesday to respond to being called a loser by Trump, to which Pritzker just threw that insult right back and called Trump the loser, saying that Trump lost in 2020. He lost a lot of endorsements that he made in 2022 and that he's going to lose again in 2024. And Pritzker said that he's not a loser because he's won 2 elections and that it's Trump who's the loser. So I don't know if this is a, 5th grade recess, match between the 2 most boisterous kids in the room, or if this is politics in 2024. But it was interesting to see from the bleachers some high-ranking elected officials using terms like real loser.
Unfortunately, it has devolved to that. Well, let's talk more about the DNC then. Heading into the DNC, there's been a lot of conversation about security issues. We expect tens of thousands of protesters, those pro-Palestinian protesters upset with the way the ongoing war between Israel and in Gaza. We expect environmentalists to be there protesting climate change and various policies related there. We expect pro-abortion protesters. Police, the Secret Service, state police have said they've got things under control. What do you expect from a protest standpoint and the security part of it?
Yeah, so I think that it's going to be managed well, I guess is how I can characterize it. Having seen the security at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee last month, there were a ton of police from multiple agencies. And we got a preview of some of the security recently with Chicago Police and the Secret Service talking about all the efforts that they're undertaking and all of the other outside law enforcement that are coming in, even law enforcement from Milwaukee coming in to help assist. But what's interesting is Chicago, obviously, they're wrestling with, crime rates, while murders might be leveling off. You still have other violent crimes. You have, organized retail theft and these things that are happening in the various communities around Chicago. So Police Superintendent Larry Snelling, he shared with the media recently that a lot of these outside law enforcement agencies are going to be more kind of focused on the United Center and McCormick Place and helping ensure the perimeter of those 2 high-profile locations is secure. While Chicago police are going to be out into the communities, and even as he said, some of those more volatile communities, Chicago police will be managing the safety there. And Snelling said that, you can't have a successful convention if only the convention is safe. He said it'll only be a successful convention if the rest of Chicago is safe. So some interesting law enforcement philosophy there. But you also had, some questions about, well, how close are the protesters going to be able to get to the convention hall? Because you can't necessarily get your point across if you can't be heard or seen. But it looks like the courts have sided with security on this and are willing to have the perimeters far enough away for these potentially tens of thousands of protesters to try to have their voices heard on a whole array of issues. Now, I know that we're going to be on the ground in Chicago, and we're going to do what we can to convey some of the concerns that protesters are raising each day with a balancing of the security provisions, but also we'll try to get reaction from some of the Democrats inside to what these protesters are saying. And then, Dan, you've got the other thing that's to throw into the mix here. Not just the thousands of high-ranking elected officials on the ground in Chicago, not just the potentially tens of thousands of protesters. We still have yet to see if Texas Governor Greg Abbott is going to be sending more non-citizen migrants that have come across the border into border communities overburdened by that influx, if they're going to be sent to Chicago. It's only Thursday today. Are we going to see more people come up in the weekend and all throughout next week? Again, another dynamic in the mix of this that is going to be interesting to see, and we'll report it all out at thecentersquare.com.
Greg Bishop, you will be joined by the Center Square's Brett Rowland. One of Brett Rowland's assignments will be to monitoring these protests, talking to protesters, reporting on whether or not there are any incidents, any violence or anything like that. So look forward to that report. Greg, one of the things you're going to cover, it's like you covered in Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention. In Milwaukee, you covered the Illinois delegation that was there. They held a morning news conference or a gaggle. Illinois Democrats are going to do the same thing next week in Chicago. You'll be on hand to cover that.
Yes. So each morning, the Democrats will have their breakfast in Illinois, and these breakfasts are likely going to be happening with other state delegations across Chicago, but we're going to focus on Illinois. It's Illinois in focus after all. So we expect to hear a lot about, their messaging and how they're going to try to differentiate themselves from Republicans. But clearly it's an opportunity to ask some hard-hitting questions to these officials about policy. And sure, we'll be there each morning to ask them these tough questions. And especially one question I asked the governor yesterday. Not sure the governor is going to be taking part in the gaggles at the Democrat breakfasts each morning. But, I asked the governor yesterday to, respond to Republicans who say that Kamala Harris has to answer for covering up Joe Biden's condition. And Pritzker said that's ridiculous. I think the actual word he said was ludicrous. And he said that Biden's been a great president and that they got a lot done. Well, there's a lot of Republicans who are seeing that a different way. And even this afternoon here in Springfield at the State Fair, GOP Chair Kathy Salvi said what happened to Joe Biden was a coup. But she also reiterated something she had said after Tim Walz was selected as the vice president, that Americans should breathe a sigh of relief that Pritzker will not be anywhere near the president's office. So, yeah, we'll be there in the mornings and report that out. And obviously people can stay close to thecentersquare.com. We'll also have one-on-one interviews. I am in the works of setting up talking with House Speaker Chris Welch, also Senate President Don Harmon. So a couple of Illinois officials that we'll have 5-minute interviews with at some point throughout the convention.
I look forward to yours and the entire team's reporting next week at thecentersquare.com. You mentioned the words. We're also going to have plenty of videos, and the listeners can read and view all of that at thecentersquare.com next week. Greg, thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing all the great coverage from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago.